Cognitive psychology. My name is Jamie Linares. What is cognitive psychology? So, according to Plato, it is the study of the mind and its mental functions, including memory and learning, attention, development, and decision making. So, the theories that include cognitive psychology are associationism and behaviorism, as well as basically the cognitive processing perspectives. Associationism, of course, was the foundation before the 1950s that eventually followed cognitive psychology and behaviorism to become their own theories. So the cognitive revolution. Before the 1950s, cognitive learnings were experimental, however dated back to the era of Aristotle. In America, the idea of behaviorism was rejected, and many theorists followed the computer model approach of learning, which led eventually to the cognitive processing perspectives. Principles of cognitive psychology. Human cognition can be fully revealed by the scientific method. Of course, that's what we use today, many people use today. That is, the individual components of mental processes can be identified and understood. Also, that the internal mental process can be described in terms of rules or algorithms in information processing models, especially the computer model. I think that's where everything comes from with this theory. So the theorists, I'm going to explain a little bit as I go. Donald Broadbent's model was in the 1950s, and this was just the fact that the transformation of information from short to long-term memory. Many other theorists that we read about in our book touch on it later. George Miller in 1956 also thought that information theory and used algorithms with it. In 1957, Alan Newell and J.C. Shaw and Herb Simon had designed a computer program that could solve difficult logic problems, a domain previously thought to be unique to humans. But in the 1960s, ends of the 1960s, beginning 1970s, Atkinson and Shiffrin in 1968 began to explain that the act of reading can be used and explained through information processing perspectives. The idea that information moves through stages just as it would through a computer. And then Slavin then in 2003 went on to model and guide what they had already established with more examples and the components of the systems used. In 1972 was the Goal model. The Goal model established that reading begins with the eye when it captures each letter from the text. It became the bottoms-up type of model, I think it was called. In 1974, LeBurg and Samuel established that reading begins with the visual processing of text, then using phonological memory along with episodic, semantic, and attention. LeBurg, Samuel, and Goal sort of had the same idea that it started from the eye and the visual processing. Theorists continued is 1975, Posner and Snyder, the theory of interactive and interactive compensatory models proposed a more nonlinear process to reading, so coming to the conclusion that one or more processing systems may be working, but they compensate for each other. In 1980, Stanovich phonological core variable difference model was used to identify and treat reading disorders, so this is sort of where it came into play. In 1986, however, Rumelhart and McClelland proposed that parallel distributed processing model that brought the idea back that learning as a process changes over time, as well as it connected to associationism, letters within a word, as well as the lines and curves. So this was more to the idea that everything is learned and it's processed a certain way. So then 1993, Coulthard established that dual route. It was sort of like the opposite of what Rumelhart and McClelland proposed. It was the dual route cascaded model where students can be placed as better or poorer readers due to their processing routes. Related it to the computer model as well, seeing that we learned and the process changes over time. However, then, the last theorist that I want to discuss in 1999, Wolf and Bowers, proposed double deficit hypothesis that explained reading disabilities more thoroughly, and this created categories and subtypes as well as made interventions easier to find for those specific students. A couple classroom applications. I think in the classroom, students exercise both short and long-term memory, which has to do with the information processing system. Go's model explains where children could be experiencing difficulties, and when students are able to decipher words and recognitions increase, those students will be able to understand much more while reading. Many of the models provide teachers the ability to assess student skills, which is what the cognitive psychologists do, sort of. They assess. Examples would be, of course, through each of the models using sight words, word families, dictionary lookups, high frequency words, and even using small group readings. The most important idea that cognitive psychology brought to literacy is the idea that our internal processes have something to do with the way we learn receptively and the way in which we express ourselves. Our language and our knowledge really depends on our internal processes. And that is all for now. Thank you so much.